All right, perfect. So it's just a couple minutes after 2, so we will get started, folks. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Kevin. I work with Taleo Project Services. I am very excited to be a part of this webinar series today. I know that it's something that it's very dear to my heart, and we're very, very fortunate to have somebody that I've worked with previously for probably like 4 or 5 years at least, maybe more than that actually, Matthias. Yeah, maybe more. We worked together down at the River Cafe for a number of years, so this is something that is, and I think it's very, very relevant to what is going on today in our world and how we do, handle food and handle everything and talk about different things. So I thought it'd be a great discussion, and of course Matthias has got some neat little fun stuff for us towards the end of this and everything, which will be a lot of fun. So I think everybody will enjoy it. So without ado, I'd like to introduce to you Matthias Fong. Matthias, why don't you maybe just go over a quick little synopsis of what where your background is and your history, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Hi everyone. Happy to be here. I was the executive chef at River Cafe for about 5 years almost. So overseeing River Cafe and Dean House Restaurant as well, for a chunk there as well. And luckily enough, the restaurant was ranked one of the best restaurants in Canada, up at 28th at some point, and had the pleasure of working in a really unique restaurant with Kevin, and we had the garden surrounding the restaurant. It was just a really unique place to work. And then I actually left the River Cafe in hopes of opening my own restaurant, and then this whole COVID explosion happened, and now it's kind of a change of plan for everyone in the entire industry, really.
So true. It's so true. And I think, and like I kind of previously mentioned before, I think I kind of want to change up our format. Usually we do a little bit more structured and everything, but I know I have lots of stuff that Matthias and I have spoken about that we're going to cover, but also too, just so the people that are on board today, if you have any questions, feel free to just kind of jump in and everything, because I know a lot of this is going to be very specific and relevant to, maybe certain things that you're doing or enduring or going through at home. So especially when it comes to, food safety and where to buy and where to shop. So we're going to cover a few things, but I thought also too, just, whoever has a question, please go ahead and open it up. So I know one of the things, Matthias, that you and I we're going to be chatting about and everything like that is and Garnet, you and we were speaking about it earlier, is that food hygiene piece. So what should you be doing with your food when you're bringing it home, Matthias? Like what are your thoughts on that? Like when you go to the grocery store and you come home, like what are the preparations that you should be doing right away?
Well, I've been trying to stay pretty current, like everyone else, with any kind of health information from either like the Canadian government website or CDC stuff or whatever. And it seems like I don't think it hasn't really changed. COVID has made people more aware of, how to handle their food and what they're touching and all that. But really in the restaurant industry as a whole, like that's something that the focus should have been on a long time ago. And I think that was made abundantly clear too by all the meat packing plants and the transmission that was happening there. So, with any kind of, food related things, I think there's always that, how you handle it and the way you're handling it. So, there's still kind of that people bringing stuff home, wiping it down with Lysol or, whatever the sanitization that they're using. And, there's some evidence that says that, it's not 100% necessary because the viral load isn't necessarily large enough on those items to necessarily be passed along. So that's still we're still trying to figure that out. I think it seems like they're still doing some more research on it from what I've read up to now. But I still think regardless, is that whenever you're bringing any produce or anything home, it's always good to just make sure that you're storing it properly anyway. So, some of the largest outbreaks of like E. coli and stuff in the last few years have actually been from like produce that hasn't been washed properly. So it really has more to do with like how you're managing your product. So if you're going to cook something and you're going to, be stewing it down or, roasting some carrots or something, really your likelihood of contracting anything from that is very, very low. So it's all about just making sure that you're washing everything before you're preparing it. And then when you're preparing it, that you're cooking it appropriately. And that seems to be, that goes for COVID, but it also goes for just, pathogens in general with any food service. So.
Matthias, what are your thoughts on vinegar? I went to this spa thing in January and they suggested like a quarter cup of vinegar in a full sink of water with your produce that you could be eating raw. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you prefer like a product?
Yeah, I think that's one method that it definitely has some effect. With a lot of pathogens and bacteria and things, viruses in general, there is a certain pH that they seem to survive at, and it's based on the length of time as well. So I think people often forget that. They think, okay, sanitization means that you sanitize and it's instant. But the biggest thing is that a lot of those products, bleach included, they need time unless you have a certain concentration of it. So vinegar does work. You do have to check how much vinegar you're putting in. And really, it's just the length of time that you have it in that solution for is really important. So a lot of bacteria and things don't like pHs of less than 4. And so your household vinegar, usually, distilled vinegar is around 2. So if you're diluting it with, a certain amount of water, it really just depends on how much you're diluting it. And of course, like the best way is to pH test your solution, but really, it's not really the most, most people wouldn't do that. But I would say, if you're doing vinegar, it does help. But there's no guarantee with these sorts of things. There's also suggestions of, using a low quantity of bleach solution and then rinsing your vegetables after that as well. And there's some proof that works as well. But again, you have to really wash it off afterwards, because anytime you're putting any bleach in any solution, it's a little bit more, you have to be a little bit more careful with it. So, but what I found is that if you're going to be eating something raw, wash it really well. If you're using the vinegar solution, either way, you're still washing it. And then after, just, where you're buying it from as well, just knowing more about where you're getting that produce from really helps as well. And I know that's not always possible, but when the farmers, and how they do their, harvesting, it makes your confidence level of what you're eating go, it's a lot easier to have trust in how your stuff is being processed. So.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Matthias, what do you think about now packaged? What about packaged goods? Because I know for me, like even now, we're bringing home a lot of our packaged stuff, whether it be, boxes of whatever. I still wipe those down. Do you think that's necessary still right now?
I think I don't see it hurting, that's for sure. And I think a lot of people have asked, in food industry, even, what are restaurants doing? Like when they're receiving their large orders of product, like how are they going to wipe every single container down or not, right? So it's kind of like I'm still personally looking at a lot of the CDC information and seeing what their research is showing. For me, research is everything. The data is everything. So what they've said so far is that because the load of virus on a surface is very likely not enough to really for you to contract it that easily. And of course, the washing your hands bit is always a big one. So what I've done is I still wipe it down like whenever I can, just to be extra safe. But it seems like it's becoming less necessary unless someone's coughed right onto something that you picked up right afterwards. I think that's a little bit that your odds are pretty low overall. But it never hurts. It never, like, extra precautions never hurt. Is some people, it's all about risk tolerance, right? So
that's funny. Research and data. I think maybe you should be a project manager. Shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about where to get things from. So, and I'll put you on the spot right away, Matthias. Is where do you buy your food from? And you can talk about that, whether it be from a produce department to a meats. We can step into sort of little, farmers locally and everything like that we support as well. So where do you get your stuff and why, I guess?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and this is something I believed truly in before, for a long time now, it's sourcing locally and not necessarily the way that a lot of people see sourcing locally. I think a lot of people see it as, as this, you're trying to save the world or something by buying locally. But I find the biggest thing about buying locally is the quality of your product, but it's also the connection with your community around you. So I find, going to the farmer's market is always a good one. But actually meeting and going to the farmers, like there's small shops around town. So for example, like if you're looking for really high quality meat, which is something that I think everyone was a little bit scared about once, Cargill kind of went down for a little bit there. And I think most people started looking at other sources. So, I buy my beef from TK Ranch. And they have a small shop just right by Chestermere, actually. And they control their entire process. So they raise the animals, and then after they do their own slaughtering, and then they bring it to their own butchering facility, and they butcher their own cows, and they process about 4 to 6 cows a week from what last time I had talked to her. And they've been getting busier, which is really great. And what has been happening is that this pandemic has caused people to look at where they're getting their meat from and how they're getting their meat. And so she was saying a lot of people would come to her shop and then they would be shocked to find out that a lot of beef isn't raised the same way that her beef is raised. And I think that's really telling of, the knowledge of like how people, research or look at their food. Just things like what you're feeding the animals, like how you're slaughtering the animals, animal welfare before slaughter, all these things. And so if you're someone that enjoys a really good steak, that's the place to go to in my mind right now, just because of the amount of work they put into each and every one of their animals. And when someone puts that much work into one animal, you definitely don't want to waste it. You definitely put a lot more care into the protein that you're eating. And then produce wise, there's a lot of good growers, and right now it's perfectly prime asparagus season, so you'll see asparagus all around. And I've been working with Innisfail growers for a long time, so Edgar Farms, and they have some of the best asparagus that you can possibly get in Alberta, and it's only a month long, so this is kind of the time, it's right now, to go to the farmers market and pick up that bunch of fresh asparagus. Most people think asparagus is kind of a year long thing, but that's always from Mexico. So it's nice to get something, that's harvested right from, outside the city. And they hand harvest everything, and then they cool everything and wash everything immediately so that the product lasts a lot longer as well. So that's what I mean by, knowing their process and how they produce their products. It really helps you kind of better understand, like what kind of product you're paying for and what you're getting for what you're paying for. So.
Yeah,
I got a question with regards to, you talked about the meat. So how can you identify when you go to like a Safeway or Sobeys and you get their packaged meat? Is there any identifier on that of where the source of the meat is?
Sometimes there is. They'll have, Co-op I know has some top grass beef. So they are trying their best to start, like they're really trying to start properly label their meat products. But unfortunately, most of the beef you're getting is usually considered under the brand of AAA or Prime. Canada Prime is what you hear often, or Canada AAA or Canada AA. That's usually what you're seeing. And it is, like, you can't say it's bad beef because it's definitely good beef. Across the world, it's still some of the most coveted beef that you're looking for. But in terms of how the animals are taken care of, and in terms the welfare and all those kind of things, it's not always all there. A lot of that beef comes from like feedlot operations. So it really just depends on where you fall in terms of your, what you think about that whole situation. But definitely with this type of beef, like the TK Ranch I was talking about, when you know that they're only doing so many animals a week, and the way that it's raised and how it's raised and then how long it's raised, it really helps. Like for me, it's not about getting rid of meat, but it's eating the right types of meat. And I think that's just a more sustainable way of doing it. So that's why it's more so on that end of things. But also flavor wise, like for me, flavor is more important than anything. So flavor wise, what you're buying at the supermarket, unfortunately, it won't necessarily be the same as the quality of something that you're buying directly from a farmer, just because they put so much more care into it. And beef that's raised on a lot of grass just has a much more unique flavor to it. And then on top of that, they actually dry age their beef for quite a significant amount of time as well, more than other places generally. So again, you're getting a lot of benefit of a lot of process and a lot of like work that's been put into it. So you know, you pay for that difference compared to what you're paying for at the supermarket, let's say.
Now, Matthias, when you're talking about the farmers markets, you can, you know, where do you, you know, they're scattered about now. Do you know which, like, who's all open now? Do you know like who's back up and open and everything right now?
Well, Calgary Farmers Market never really closed. They kind of operated under the like essential services. So they still have their market open, and you know, they've done all their best to make it, you know, spaced out as much as possible, and they have lanes and stuff for the different lanes that are too narrow. There's, you know, arrows on the floor like you would probably see at most supermarkets nowadays. So that's open. Hillhurst Sunnyside Market is open now, the outdoor market there, which I went to yesterday. It's every Wednesday, and they have a good, you know, little grouping there of suppliers, you know, from greenhouses to, you know, small asparagus farm in Brooks that they had there, and then a bunch of smaller producers as well, just, you know, selling different types of food products. So they're open as well, so that's a nice little place, and because it's outside, it's nice as well. So
that is a nice.
Those are the main ones. So
what and I know what, like, you know, like Doran was talking about, for those of us that maybe don't have the opportunity or advantage to be checking out all of these different sort of local places and markets, is there you know, and we'll try not to offend Garnet here as we got him on, is there anybody you know, that you prefer to go to for sort of the bigger sort of markets, I guess you could say?
Well, I think like a lot of the supermarkets have done a really great job of changing their tactics a little bit, and a lot of them have a lot of good products now in store. So even like Co-op and stuff sources a lot of different produce locally as well now, which is really great to see. Like Community Natural Foods obviously has you know, a smaller selection, but has a wide range of, you know, locally sourced products as well. And again, just like there's quality products, but it's just about kind of like what you're looking for, right? So I think the Co-ops and the, you know, like all the different supermarkets actually have really changed their tactics a little bit in the last few years, and all kind of have some products that are you know, good. And I think the biggest thing is reading the label. So you know, you can't really do that as much these days because you don't want to be the ones milling around the supermarket, but you know, I used to be the one that, you know, you just grab the label and just read what's in it as much as you can. And then produce wise, it's easy just to do a little bit of internet research nowadays. So
Karen, I think you had a question, so go ahead, jump on in, Karen, please.
Actually, I think it's more of a sales pitch than anything, but I'm an Innisfail girl. Like, I only buy my carrots there for the last 15 years, which I texted to you guys, but you're right, the market did not close. It's the best market ever, the Heritage Market. But I truly do buy all my items at the Innisfail Market, as well as the seeds for my garden. I just got dill and beets and carrots from them, so I can grow my own carrots just like they do. But I buy 25-pound bags that last me like 2 or 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And another plug for them, two things, is that in August, they always have a family day. And so you can literally go out there and see how they grow, see, you know, of course, it's got lots of younger children at it, but there's lots of interest for everybody. And you can see all the different avenues, like hot houses for cucumbers and the carrots and everything else. So that's one thing. And then I have to say, last Thursday, I went and did my online pickup order from them, and they were outstanding. I pulled into the market, texted them that I was there, and within minutes, I had my $75 of produce in my trunk, literally minutes. So I can't say anything more than that. Unfortunately, there's no carrots till the end of July. Once they get in, don't go, because I buy them all. Just saying. But they are the very best. So plug for them.
I love it. That's awesome.
Fully agree with that.
All right, let's get to the fun part now. I know we can still save a few minutes for questions afterwards, but I know Matthias is going to do a little some demonstrating for us. So I'm not sure who out there are big oyster fans, but I know Matthias and I were chatting about this last week, and we thought this would be a fun little thing for him to kind of show everybody. So maybe not something that everybody does at home, but it's kind of a fun little thing that we know quite well. And there's ways that you can do it well and ways that you can maybe not do it so well. So we'll get Matthias to kind of walk us through and maybe talk a little bit about the oysters and everything that you have as well, Matthias, please.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone shucks oysters at home, but I thought this was a good little, especially coming up to Father's Day, you know, something that usually you order in a restaurant generally. It's not usually something you do at home, so I thought it'd be fun to do something along these lines. I know a lot of people have shucked oysters before, and so I think it's more about, not just about shucking the oysters, it's also about, you know, where to get them and things. So these oysters I got from Metaphor Foods. He has a small shop, which Kevin's going to share the information for. And, you know, he brings oysters in every week, even a couple times a week sometimes. And, you know, it's again, knowing your product. So because he's kind of the middleman, he goes in there and he really helps kind of bridge the gap between the coast and you know, from, for us here in Calgary. So he brings all these really awesome oysters in, and then you know that they're nice and fresh, so you're not running into any issues with that. Because again, like, it's all about connection to your product. So he's also, for this group here, he's going to be doing a little deal. I talked to him about, you know, again, supporting local like suppliers. So you know, I told him that I would mention him here, and then hopefully you guys would go in there. What he's going to do is he's actually going to throw in free oyster shucker with the purchase of 12 oysters for this group here today. So.
Show us the oyster shucker, Matthias, because that's a neat little weapon.
Yeah, so yeah, he's going to throw in an oyster shucker. I'm not sure exactly which type he's going to throw in. This is the one I prefer to use. So it's just a nice straight edge, and it's got a nice sharp tip on it. A lot of people, when they shuck oysters, they think that they're trying to like stab the thing, like really reef at it. And really, it's actually a really simple process. It's actually a lot simpler than people tend to make it seem. And I know I've seen a lot of cooks. I've taken a lot of cooks to the hospital as well from them stabbing themselves with one of these guys, because they think that you have to really like jam it in there. But it's actually quite a simple process, and if you do it properly, you don't actually need very much force, as much force as people think. So this is Leslie Hardy. So these are PEI oysters. So really tasty, really briny, awesome flavor to them. And my setup is always around the same. You know, I set up a cutting board, and then you set up a towel. And this is how you prevent from stabbing yourself, is that you use the towel to hold the oyster, and it just covers your hand. And then it also allows the extra brine from the oyster not to leak out all over the place when you're shucking. The cloth also allows you to wipe this, which is really important, because you see, when you're shucking an oyster, you're actually inserting into this muscle, this lid here. And the problem is that often there's a lot of bacteria and things that reside right in here, and it's hard to really clean in there. So I always say it's nice to get rid of that grit as well, you know, in terms of sand, to get that grit out of the back here. So I always wipe my knife off as I'm shucking. So pretty simple. You insert into the back like that, right? If everyone can see that.
Yeah.
And then after, all you're doing is you actually wiggle, which is, most people think that you got to like jam your arm into it like this, but really you're just giving it a nice wiggle into that back spot there. So you see my hand moving back and forth, and wiggle in there. And then after, really, once you have it nice and firm into that spot, you're turning the knife and popping it. So that's it. So this is open now technically. So now it's still shut. So what you do is you have to cut the muscle that's on the top, kind of right on the top, I guess like this part of the muscle here. So you're just going to run the knife underneath the shell. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So then after, you see, I'll just this one. So you see there's this muscle here, and that you're just running your knife right along that muscle on the top of the shell. That's all you're really doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do another one just for.
And while you're busting this out, Matthias, tell us a little bit about and you and I could go on about this for hours, but what's the difference between East and West Coast oysters?
So really the biggest thing is that is a big flavor difference. They're obviously very different structurally. A lot of the East Coast oysters have a really strong briny flavor to them. They're considered a type of oyster called Malpex. So those types of oysters tend to all have this really nice briny flavor to it. So that's usually preferred by most people. The West Coast oysters tend to have a different profile, and they tend to be a little bit more unique, and they tend to have this creamier texture to it. So some people really prefer that a little bit more. And a lot of them now are raised, in baskets that are just dropped into the ocean. So the shells are really soft and brittle as well. And sometimes they tumble in the ocean. So there's different styles of growing, and it's pretty inventive. There's a lot of new ways of growing oysters. But again, the biggest difference is flavor, and it's a personal preference thing, honestly. So this is usually something you go to a restaurant and there's a guy in the back and he's shucking away. So again, you're lifting that shell, and you see after I twist, I just lift it, and then after I just give myself enough space to run the knife underneath along the top of the shell, and then I cut that muscle, right? And then I lift. That's it. So there's not like, there you go.
Okay, now
So
next thing, so we're going to put you on the spot again, is what's the best way to eat an oyster? And what do you like to eat them with?
well, again, I think that's one of those really personal preferences things. So, some people live and die by their Tabasco sauce. And then some people, will mix it up. So this is something that I'm going to share with you guys, something that I thought is a little bit unique. It's a little bit different, and you can make it at home really easy. So this is just a mason jar. And this is actually from Vietnam. It's a Vietnamese pickle. They call it pickled garlic, essentially. So it's a rice wine vinegar and water. And then you heat it up, and then you just pour it over top of your garlic and some chilies. And then you let that steep in your fridge for as long as you want, depending on how hot you want it. And so this will give you that nice acidity that goes really great with oysters. It kind of feels almost like your Tabasco sauce, kind of got a little bit of heat, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of flavor to it. And then it's homemade as well. So if you're someone that grows your own stuff, really easy to do with things like garlic, with your own chives and things like that. So that's, again, a nice way to make it kind of more custom, I guess. And then if you're happening to be at Metaphor Foods, he also sells like Canadian sturgeon caviar. So this is a 30-gram tin of caviar that he sells. And so this is a really nice treat for a special occasion. It's about $70 for this container here. But to top your oysters with a little bit of caviar is always a nice treat. This one's empty right now, but so yeah, again, like a nice little treat. And it's funny because Eric at Metaphor, he was saying, with a lot of people staying at home, they're not going out to eat at the restaurants that much, but it's a nice treat to be able to bring something home like this and have with your oysters, something that you would normally not have at home. So it's just the cost of going out for dinner versus having a nice oyster meal at home, I guess. So.
Now, we're just coming up to the 2:30 hour. So if anybody has any questions while Matthias is still popping some pictures, I'm sure he's going to jump
I have a
in there.
question. Sorry, I have a question. I always have a question. Sorry. So I grew up in Newfoundland. I used to pick mussels with my grandpa, really cold Atlantic. We used to sit them in water before we did anything with them. So with oysters, if we cycle back to before you shuck them, should we soak them in cold water before to remove sand and such, or?
With mussels and clams, that purging kind of is a little bit more necessary.
Right.
What you'll find with a lot of shellfish nowadays is they actually do a lot of that work for you beforehand. So a lot of clams and mussels and things like that, they'll harvest them and they'll put them in these bags and they'll let them tumble in the ocean. So they're actually already all purged before you even get them. So
okay.
So you have a lot less work to do when you get home and then you're putting it into water. One little trick that I've learned with oysters, and I think there's a million different ways and million different ways people do it. But if you add a hot chili to the water that you're soaking your clams in, the capsaicin in the chili actually agitates the clams and the mussels a little bit, and they actually tend to get rid of more of their grit. So that's a nice little trick.
Like a dry hot chili or a fresh one?
Ideally fresh, because essentially what you want is that capsaicin to get into the oil and then or get into the water, and then after that way it kind of irritates them a little bit, and then they tend to purge a little bit better. With oysters, it's not really necessary. Like I just give them a really good scrub, a really good wash. But generally, oysters, you don't have any of that grit happening. And the way that a lot of oysters are grown, like I said, they're in in trays in the ocean already, so they're not really on the bottom like they often are, or they often used to be. So just again, it just depends which ones you're getting, but clams and mussels for sure. I put them in some cold water and then throw a couple chilies in there. So
Thank you. That's awesome. This is great. Thank you.
All right, guys, so we are coming up to 2:30, so I just want to, first of all, thank Matthias for his time. I know that, I think too, if anybody's really interested in his little mini net that he made, I'm sure I can get a recipe or two from him, and so just let me know and I can make sure to get it over to you guys if you like. And thank you for your time. So Matthias, first of all, thank you, but thank everyone for joining. I know it's a busy and challenging time in life, so we just like to, here at Taleo, we're all about connecting, so it's all about getting together. This is something fun, something that we can all kind of do, versus, what's going on in our lives and, whether busy or not out there. So your time is very much appreciated, and thank you very, very much for joining us. So.
My only feedback is we need more time, Matthias.
Well, I know, and that's so true, because I know, like we said, Matthias and we could talk about oysters probably for another hour or so, and we wouldn't touch on any two topics either. So, and
is there any other recipes we could touch on, since some of us aren't oyster fans? I just along for the ride, but I would love other recipes, Matthias. Anytime.
Yeah. What kind of recipes are you looking for? I'm happy to share.
There we go.
Oh, this will be a long meeting, you and I. Anything with vegetables is awesome, and I absolutely meat eater, but oysters aren't my thing. So, chicken. Your favorite chicken recipe?
Favorite chicken recipe? That's a hard one. Yeah, I mean, I think if Kevin wants to pass along my email to you, we can email back and forth, because I think this could go on for days, I think so.
It's interesting. We talked about vegetables. Matthias, tell them what you were doing, or you tell them what you were telling me about what you were doing last week.
Which one was that?
It was the vegan.
Oh yeah, just making like like different chickpea stews and stuff last week. I was making it for some staff, so trying to make something that's vegan, gluten free, to fit everyone's dietary needs, and yeah, it's just, if you can source good vegetables, like, it's always gonna be really good. So I think that's the key always, is the quality of your vegetables, obviously. So that's a big one. Yeah, if you're not an oyster fan, just a little plug for Metaphor here, since he's doing us that favor. Again, if you mention the company name, then he'll give you that oyster knife with the 12 oysters. But if you're not an oyster fan, he actually has a huge variety of seafood there as well, of other types. He's got fish, he's got scallops, he's got some really awesome crab and any seafood related things. But he also has vegetables as well. He sells wild foraged vegetables often, so it's not always in stock, but he'll have like morel mushrooms, which are in season right now, and fiddleheads for the fiddlehead lovers out there. So those are all things that he sells at that shop. So it's not just seafood that he sells there. He also sells mustard as well, brassica mustard there as well. So there's a lot of small little things that he sells that are all really good. So not just for the seafood lovers, but also just for anything interesting that you're looking for. That's a really good place to go.
And
thank you for that. I'm actually gonna look them up. So that's awesome. Thanks so much.
Me too. Thank you so much. What a great job. Thanks, Kevin. And
I think he's down in the southeast too, so that might help you out a little bit, Karen, as well. Okay. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you very much. So to get to Sierra, I mentioned Taleo, and we'll all be better for it. So support local, and thanks again for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, Matthias.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.